The wind howled through the mountains of dawn as Eddard Stark pulled his blood-soaked blade free from the chest of the last Kingsguard knight. Sir Gerald Hightower collapsed at his feet, eyes wide, not with fear, but confusion. Perhaps even regret, Ned barely noticed. His breaths came hard, shallow. His tunic was torn, his armor scratched. Beside him, Howland Reed coughed blood and staggered against a rock, clutching his side. The Tower of Joy stood just ahead, pale, quiet, and still. "She's up there," Ned whispered. He didn't wait. He ran past the bodies of dead knights who had once sworn to protect Rhaegar Targaryen's secrets. Their oath had died with them. Ned had come for his sister, and this time he wasn't too late. The stairs creaked beneath his boots as he rushed upward. At the top, the door flung open with a single shove. The scent of blood, sweat, and damp cloth hit him instantly. And there she was, Lyanna Stark, pale, weak, soaked in sweat, lying on a straw-stuffed bed. But she was alive, barely. "Ned," she rasped, eyes fluttering open. I'm here, Lya." Her lips trembled. "The baby." "What baby?" he asked, though his gut already twisted with the answer. She turned her head, and there, in the shadowed corner, was a bundle, wrapped in blue, barely whimpering. A child, small, quiet, alive. "His name," she whispered, "is Aegon." Ned felt the ground shift under him. Rhaegar's child? His sister's? Lover-rapist? The lines blurred. The truth was tangled. But the boy was breathing, and Lyanna, she was not dying. Ned dropped to his knees beside her and took her hand. "We're leaving," he said. "You and the child. I'll get you out of here. I swear it." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "He'll hunt us, Robert. He won't stop." "Let him come," Ned said. "He's not king yet." But as he wrapped the child in a clean cloth and cradled it in his arms, a cold dread settled in his heart. Robert Baratheon loved Lyanna, but he hated Targaryens more. The ride back to Winterfell was long and treacherous. They avoided roads, traveled by night, stayed in shadows. Lyanna grew stronger with each passing day, though grief always lingered behind her smile. She never spoke of Rhaegar. She never called herself a princess. Only a girl who ran and bled and nearly died. When they finally reached the north, the castle gates of Winterfell opened not with cheer, but confusion. "Lady Lyanna?" people murmured.
"Is that?"
Benjen wept. Maester Luwin trembled. Old Nan made the sign of the gods. And then came the Raven. Robert had taken the throne. The war was won. Rhaegar was dead. The Mad King burned. And the lion now sat beside the stag. Ned read the letter in silence. Robert was inviting him to court, to celebrate victory, and to honor Lyanna, presumed dead. The new king did not yet know she lived, or that she had given birth to the blood of his greatest enemy. Ned burned the letter before sunrise. Lyanna sat beside the hearth in the godswood, the child in her arms. She looked up at her brother, eyes already understanding. "You can't hide us forever." "I'll do what I must," Ned said, "even if I have to lie, even if it means turning against the king I helped make." He hated lies, but he loved his sister more. And so the biggest lie of his life was born. Aegon Targaryen died that day, in name only. From that moment on, the child would be known as Jon Snow, Ned Stark's bastard. A shameful mark to wear, a scar of dishonor, but one that kept the truth buried beneath Winterfell's frost. Yet even as Ned tried to protect his family, something deep inside him knew. The realm would not forget what had been done, or what had been hidden. What he had saved might one day destroy them all. The snows of Winterfell came early that year, blanketing the ancient stone walls with silence. It was a silence Ned Stark had grown familiar with, one that mirrored the weight inside his chest. Every time he looked at the boy, Jon, he felt it. That cold, that dread, that lie. He had told Catelyn the child was his. A mistake, a moment of weakness during the war. Her face hadn't changed, not even when she turned away without a word. That wound would never truly heal, not between them. But Ned couldn't tell her the truth. He had promised Lyanna. She sat now in the chambers once reserved for noble guests, hidden from all but a few trusted servants. Even that was a risk. Every time a raven flew, every time a guest arrived, he feared the wrong whisper might escape. "Winterfell is not mine anymore, Ned," Lyanna said one night, her voice low as the fire crackled between them. "I've become a ghost here. You're alive. That's enough. For now." She looked down at Jon. The baby had her eyes, stark grey, but everything else, the shape of the face, the soft curve of the mouth, it was Rhaegar. No denying it. The dragon blood was there, quiet, sleeping. "What if Robert finds out?" she asked. "He won't." Lyanna laughed softly, bitterly. "You don't know him anymore. He used to be kind. He used to be brave. Now he drinks, he kills. He wears a crown forged in vengeance." Ned didn't reply. He remembered Robert's face after Rhaegar fell, how he had smiled, soaked in blood, lifting a warhammer over a shattered helm. That wasn't love. That was hate satisfied. Jon stirred, letting out a soft sound. Lyanna held him tighter. "Promise me, Ned, if anything happens to me, you protect him. You keep the secret, no matter the cost." "I've already promised." "No, not as a brother, as his father." Ned blinked. "Liar! No one can know. Not even Benjen. You're the only one I trust." He wanted to argue, but couldn't. The realm was poisoned with old grudges. The name Targaryen still burned in the mouths of lords like acid. If they found out Rhaegar's son still lived, no matter how innocent the child, they'd kill him. Robert would kill him. So Ned nodded. And from that moment forward he wore the lie like a second skin. The years passed. Jon grew fast and curious. He followed Robb everywhere, rode better than most squires by age 5. Quiet too, like his mother, like a Stark. But every now and then, when he got angry, Ned saw fire in his eyes. That slow, cold kind of anger, the kind that remembered. And every time Catelyn looked at the boy, her lips would tighten. "He's not your problem," she'd said once, when Jon scraped his knee and Ned rushed to him. "You already have 5 children." "He is mine," Ned said sharply. Too sharply. She had turned away, eyes wet, and said nothing more. In King's Landing, ravens whispered and feasts echoed with stories of rebellion and glory. But in the north, Ned watched Jon grow into something quiet and strong, something dangerous maybe, or something pure. One night Lyanna stood on the battlements watching the stars. Jon slept inside. Ned joined her, wrapped in furs. "You should have let me die," she said. "Don't say that. You think we won because I lived? Look around you, Ned. Catelyn hates you. The court wants your head for staying in the north. Robert's drowning in wine and grief, and Jon, he's the last piece of a war that never truly ended." He looked at her and said softly, "But you're alive." Lyanna turned to him, tired. "Yes, and that's the problem, isn't it? I lived, so now the lie has to live too." A fortnight later, word came from the south. Robert Baratheon would ride north, to Winterfell, with the Queen and her children. And everything Ned had built, every lie, every whisper buried in snow, was about to be tested by fire. The king's procession arrived like thunder rolling through a valley. Bright banners snapped in the wind, Baratheon stags and Lannister lions snarling beside each other. Over 200 men rode through the gates of Winterfell, their armor polished, their faces smug. The north hadn't seen this much gold since Aegon's conquest. Ned stood on the steps of the great keep, cloaked in furs, flanked by his sons and daughters. His face held the calm of a frozen lake, but his heart was pounding like war drums. Robert Baratheon had come, and with him, danger. Robert was larger than Ned remembered, heavier, slower, a wine-soaked shadow of the warrior he had once been. But his eyes still held that fire, that spark of a man who had loved a woman too much and destroyed kingdoms for it. When he stepped down from his horse, he didn't hesitate. He walked straight to Ned and pulled him into a tight, rough embrace. "Gods, Ned," Robert boomed. "You haven't changed a bit." "You've gotten fat," Ned said with the faintest smile. Robert laughed, loud and free. "And you're still a cold bastard. Gods, it's good to see you." But even as they laughed, Ned felt it, the weight of secrets thick in the air. Robert's arm around him felt like a chain. Then came Cersei, cold and regal, with her golden hair and eyes like sharp glass. Behind her, Joffrey, smug and sneering. The Lannisters had brought their power and their poison with them. Inside, the feast was loud, full of clashing cups and false laughter. Robert drank heavily, as expected. He pulled Ned aside after the third course, leading him into the crypts. It was cold down there, silent. The torches flickered against ancient stone faces. "She's down here, isn't she?" Robert asked, his voice low now. "Lyanna?" Ned nodded. "Come." They stopped before her statue. The stone likeness did her no justice. Too still, too distant. But it didn't matter. Robert reached out and touched her hand. "I loved her," he whispered. Ned said nothing. Robert's eyes glistened. "She was meant to be my queen. Instead, I married a lioness, cold, treacherous, and Lyanna, God's Lyanna. Rhaegar stole her from me, and Lyanna, God's Lyanna. Rhaegar stole her from me." Ned's jaw clenched. "Did he?" he asked quietly. Robert turned. "What are you saying?" "Only that we'll never know the whole of it." Robert's face darkened. "I know enough. He took her. He raped her. He killed her, Ned. She died in childbirth." Robert's brow furrowed. "What?" Ned froze. "You never told me that," Robert said, staring at him now. "Childbirth? I didn't want to speak of it." Robert's voice softened. "There was a child." Ned paused. "No, the babe died with her." He said it evenly, calm, without hesitation. But inside he felt the walls closing in. That night Lyanna did not join the feast. She remained hidden deep in the servants' wing, with Jon tucked beside her. The child had grown into a quiet, serious boy, sharp-eyed, observant, and already asking questions. "Why doesn't Lady Stark like me?" he had asked Lyanna days ago. She didn't answer. What could she say? That the woman believed he was a product of lust and betrayal? That her own father wore the stain of treason to protect a lie? The next morning, Jon wandered into the courtyard, while Arya practiced with a stick. Sansa stood nearby, sighing over Joffrey from a distance, and Cersei watched them all from the balcony above, her gaze flickering from one child to another. When she saw Jon, she narrowed her eyes. He looked too much like a Targaryen child, and Cersei Lannister knew bloodlines better than anyone. That evening, Ned found a note beneath his door. No seal. Just a folded piece of parchment with a single sentence. "Does the bastard carry the dragon's blood?" His hands trembled. They were being watched. Someone had seen too much. And now the fire was creeping toward the snow. The note haunted Ned through the night. He sat alone in the solar, staring into the hearth as if the flames might burn away the truth. He read the message again and again. "Does the bastard carry the dragon's blood?" Until the ink blurred in his vision. Someone knew or guessed too much. Only a handful of people in the world could even think to ask that question, and fewer still would dare write it. He thought of Cersei's eyes narrowing at Jon, of Varys with his spiders, of Littlefinger with his smirks and secrets. Even Maester Pycelle could have put the pieces together if he squinted hard enough. Jon's face wasn't unmistakably Targaryen, but the hints were there, the high cheekbones, the darkness in the eyes, the brooding quiet. Too solemn for a bastard born of war. Too regal. Ned had to act, not rashly, not with fury, with caution, the kind of cold planning only a Stark could survive. The next morning, he summoned Lyanna before dawn. She arrived cloaked, hooded, her face pale with worry. "We need to move the boy," Ned said. "Someone suspects." "Move him where?" she whispered. "Who do we trust?" Ned thought for a long moment. "No one." She looked away. "I can't lose him, Ned. You won't, but if he stays in Winterfell much longer, I can't promise he'll live either." She swallowed hard and nodded. That was all. Later that day, as the Lannisters hunted in the woods and the royal court buzzed with meaningless gossip, Ned approached Catelyn in the Godswood. She was praying at the heart tree, her face calm and still, but her eyes were tired. He hadn't spoken to her truthfully in years. "There's something I need you to do," he said. She looked up, wary. "Take the children," he said. "Go to River Run. Take Jon too." Her face twisted. "Jon, why?" "It's not safe here." "It's not safe anywhere with that boy near my own." Ned's voice hardened. "Please, Cat, for once don't question me." She hesitated, then said quietly, "You still haven't told me the truth. After all these years, you made me raise him like some unwanted stain." "I know. And yet you never once said who the mother was." Ned's lips parted. The words were on the tip of his tongue. "It was Lyanna. It was our last hope. It was the only way to protect him." But he said nothing. "Because if I told you the truth," he whispered, "you'd hate me for it. And him." "I already do," she said, her voice like ice, and walked away. Meanwhile, Lyanna sat with Jon near the old well in the courtyard. She ran a hand through his hair as he played with a carved wooden direwolf. "Why do I look different than the others?" he asked quietly. Lyanna paused. "You don't," she said. "You just look like yourself." "But I'm not Rob's brother." "No," she whispered. "You're mine." His eyes widened. "You're my mother?" She smiled, but tears shimmered at the edge of her lashes. "Yes, but you can't tell anyone. Not ever." "Why?" "Because the world doesn't like who your father was." He tilted his head.
"Was he a bad man?"
Lyanna looked away. "No, he was just a man who wanted too much, and in wanting it he destroyed everything." Jon didn't understand, not yet, but he nodded anyway. That night, as snow fell gently on the quiet halls of Winterfell, a scream pierced the air. A maidservant, one of Lyanna's attendants, was found dead in the weirwood grove. Her throat slit, her eyes wide in terror. No gold cloaks had been seen, no strangers near the grounds. Yet someone had slipped past guards and torches and left a message. There was no note this time, only a dragon carved in blood into the snow beside her body. In the great hall, Ned stood with Lyanna, Howland Reed, who had arrived quietly from the Neck days ago, and trusted guards sworn to secrecy. "They've started hunting," Ned said grimly. Howland nodded. "And if they know what Jon is, they'll kill him." And Lyanna. Howland turned to Lyanna. "We need to send them south." "To who?" Ned asked. "No one trusts Targaryens, not anymore." "Then we find someone who still believes in the realm," Howland said. "Someone far from the game, someone no one would suspect." By morning, a plan was in place. Lyanna and Jon would vanish, not north, not to the Wall, not to River Run or any known house, but south, to Oldtown, cloaked among the commoners, where the Meisters kept their silence and history slept beneath dust and stone. Jon Snow would vanish from Winterfell, and in his place the lie would live on. But as the gates closed behind them, a pair of eyes watched from the towers, golden, cold, unblinking. Cersei Lannister knew a bastard when she saw one, and this one reeked of dragons. Cersei Lannister did not believe in coincidences. Not when a maid turned up dead with a bloody dragon in the snow. Not when the quiet bastard of House Stark suddenly disappeared overnight. And not when Lyanna Stark, supposedly long dead, was glimpsed in a cloak by a passing servant who spoke too much after a few cups of wine. She sat alone in her chambers, staring into her cup of arbor red. Her fingers traced the rim, but her mind was elsewhere. "A bastard with Targaryen features," she murmured to herself, "hidden by the most honorable man in the realm." What kind of sin would make Ned Stark lie? The answer chilled her. A Targaryen heir. She couldn't prove it, not yet. But if she could, she would have the one thing she craved more than gold, more than power: leverage. Across the hall, Robert snored drunk in their bed, his belly rising and falling like a dying beast. He hadn't noticed anything. He rarely did anymore. She looked at him with disgust. He had once burned the world to avenge Lyanna Stark, and now he was too dull to see the storm rising under his nose. But she saw it. She always did. Far away in the south, near the dusty sprawl of Oldtown, a small cart rolled down the sloping hill roads, carrying a woman in worn clothing and a child with black hair and curious eyes. Jon. Lyanna kept her hood up. Her face had aged in just weeks, worry carving fresh lines where joy had once lived. She held Jon close, pretending to be just another common woman, a poor widow with her son. The guards at the gates barely looked at them. That was the point. Maester Luwin had sent a raven ahead to an old mentor in the citadel. A quiet man, loyal, disillusioned with the crown. He agreed to hide them, just for a while. Their new home was a tiny stone house tucked behind the walls of the library district, surrounded by leaning towers and bells that rang with every passing hour. There were no bannermen, no northern winds, just dust, salt, and quiet. Jon asked questions every day. "Why can't I say who I am? Because some truths get you killed, Lyanna said. Who was my father, really? And she would pause, then lie. A brave man, but the wrong kind of brave. Back in Winterfell, Ned stood at the gates watching the last of the royal banners disappear over the horizon. Robert had left, drunk, bloated, and oblivious. The visit had ended without incident, but the air was still thick with danger. Cersei had said nothing to him, not a word about Jon, about Lyanna, about anything. That silence terrified him more than if she'd screamed it aloud. It meant she was thinking. Howland Reed approached from behind. We bought time, nothing more. Time is all I need, Ned said, but he didn't believe it. That night a raven came from the south. They're safe, it read, for now. But the boy is asking questions, and someone is watching the house. Ned folded the letter with shaking hands. Even in the farthest corner of the realm, Jon was being hunted. In Oldtown, Lyanna heard the footsteps first, soft, careful. Too careful. She snuffed the candle and reached for the blade under her bed. Her hand shook. Jon was sleeping in the next room, his toy direwolf clutched to his chest. The door creaked. A shadow moved. Lyanna lunged, steel flashed, and the intruder grunted as the blade grazed his arm. "Wait," the man hissed. "I was sent by Howland Reed." She froze. He knelt, bleeding but calm. "They found you." "Who?" "The Queen. She sent someone, not to kill. To take him." "She sent someone, not to kill. To take him." "Jon." That night they fled again. This time deeper into the Reach, through river paths and silent villages, hiding by day and riding by night. Lyanna felt the old sickness return, the one that filled her lungs back in the Tower of Joy. The world was shrinking. No place was safe. As the sun rose over the hills, Jon finally spoke what had been growing inside him. "Am I a Targaryen?" Lyanna stopped the horse. He looked up at her. "I heard you, that man. He said the Queen wants the dragon boy." Her hands trembled, and finally she said it. "Yes." Jon stared at her. "Then who am I really?" She looked into his eyes and whispered, Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna. "But you must never say that name again. Not to anyone." "Why not?" "Because that name will either make you king or get you killed." Back in the Red Keep, Cersei received word that her spies had failed to retrieve the boy. She stared into the fire as her maids whispered rumors of the growing unrest beyond the seas, of dragons awakening, of Dothraki movements, of whispers in the free cities that the blood of the dragons still lived. Cersei smirked and sipped her wine. Let the game begin. The wind in the Reach carried a different kind of chill. Not the bite of the north, but the crawling sensation that someone was watching, always near, just out of sight. Lyanna Stark, riding beneath a cloak and carrying the blood of two great houses behind her, knew that feeling all too well now. They'd been moving from village to village, never staying more than a day. Jon no longer asked why. He just obeyed. Silent, sharp, and suspicious, at only 10, he had already learned what most lords never did. Survival means becoming invisible. But even in hiding, rumors traveled faster than horses. They heard whispers in inns, snatches of tavern talk, bits of drunken songs. The Queen's looking for a boy with dragon eyes. Word is, the bastard of Winterfell ain't Ned Stark's get at all. Some say he's the last dragon, and the wolves are hiding him. Lyanna knew what it meant. Cersei wasn't trying to kill Jon anymore. She was trying to claim him. Maybe use him as a puppet. Maybe twist the truth, say he was the child of Rhaegar and Elia, not Lyanna. It didn't matter. Once the Queen got her claws into him, the lie would become hers. And Lyanna, she'd be buried again. This time not in the crypts, but in history. Back in Winterfell, Ned sat beneath the godswood alone. He could feel the old gods watching, but they gave no answers. No comfort, just silence. Maester Luwin approached with a scroll. The seal had been broken already. Lannister gold shimmered on the wax. "She's asking questions," Luwin said carefully. "Queen Cersei has requested a formal record of all Stark bannermen and their sworn families. She claims it's for the census." Ned's jaw clenched. "It's a trap. She's trying to find out who helped hide them." Ned took the scroll and burned it on the spot. Let her dig. Let her twist. He wouldn't play her game. But in the back of his mind, something darker stirred. If Cersei couldn't take Jon by force, she might try to claim his name another way. Far across the narrow sea, a whisper reached the free cities. The same whisper that had once sailed to Pentos in exile, where Viserys Targaryen and his silver-haired sister sat in bitter poverty. Aegon lives. At first Viserys laughed. Lies. The usurper killed my brother's children. But Daenerys, younger, wiser in ways her brother wasn't, listened more carefully. He wouldn't lie about this, said the old smuggler who brought the message. Not Howland Reed, he saw the child. A boy born in Dorne, son of Rhaegar, hidden by the Starks. Viserys stood trembling. Then the throne is his. And in that moment something shattered inside him. All his life he had believed he was the heir, the rightful king. But if Aegon lived, the real Aegon, Rhaegar's true-born son, then he was nothing. And madness has always followed the blood of kings. That night Viserys vanished from Pentos. 3 days later, the smuggler turned up dead, his tongue cut out, his body dumped in the harbour. Meanwhile, in the Reach, Lyanna and Jon found temporary shelter at an old abandoned sept near the Manda River. Overgrown with moss and ivy, the place had long since been forgotten by war and politics. For 2 nights they rested. For 2 nights there was peace. Jon studied an old sword left behind in the ruins. He trained with it clumsily but with purpose. Lyanna watched him with a strange ache in her chest. You don't have to be a fighter, she told him gently. He looked up serious. If I don't fight, I'll die. She hated how right he was. But he still didn't know what waited for him, what legacy ran in his veins. He didn't know that Rhaegar had once believed in a prophecy, a song of ice and fire, a child who would bring balance to the realm. Jon wasn't just a hidden heir. He was meant to be something more. And Lyanna, she feared that future more than any assassin's blade. That night the sky opened with rain. Thunder cracked over the hills. Lyanna sat by the fire, sword in hand, staring into the past. She remembered Rhaegar's voice, soft and obsessed. He will be the prince that was promised, Lyanna. Together we are prophecy. But prophecy didn't hold her hand when she was bleeding in that tower. Prophecy didn't save her from the screams or the smell of death in the bedstraw. Only Ned had. And now, the child born from Rhaegar's dream might die from Cersei's nightmare. At the edge of the firelight, a figure approached. Jon stood, sword drawn. Who's there? The man stepped forward, wet from rain, hood down. He knelt slowly. Jon, he said, I knew your father. Lyanna stood, heart-pounding. You're not from Reed, she said. No, the man said. I came from across the sea, and I bring a message from your cousin, Daenerys Stormborn. Jon blinked. Who? The man looked up. She's the last dragon, or so we thought, until we heard you were still breathing. The man's name was Quaithe, or so he claimed. His accent was faintly Asozi, but his voice was crisp and smooth like silk soaked in wine. He spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had crossed oceans chasing whispers. Lyanna didn't trust him. Jon didn't know what to think. You say Daenerys sent you, Lyanna said, sword still in her hand. Prove it. Quaithe smiled, slow and measured. Your brother's sword, ice. Its blade was once carried through the red waste. Daenerys saw it in a vision, held by a wolf among fire. She believed it meant House Stark would one day stand beside her. She didn't know it was you, my lady. Not until the whispers reached us in Bravos. Lyanna narrowed her eyes. You talk like a man of riddles. What do you want? I want to deliver a message, he said, looking at Jon now. The mother of dragons welcomes the last son of Rhaegar Targaryen, and she wants to meet him before the queen does. Jon blinked. Daenerys is my cousin? Quaithe nodded. And the last of your kind. She thought herself alone in this world. She will want your trust, perhaps your sword. Jon looked at Lyanna, uncertain. Lyanna felt a chill in her bones. Not from the rain, not from the man, from fate itself, curling around her son like smoke. We're not going to Essos, she said. It's a trap. Quaithe didn't argue. He simply placed a coin into Jon's hand, old Valyrian steel, black as ash, and etched with a 3-headed dragon. When the time comes, he said, this will be your key. Then he vanished into the storm, as if he'd never been there. By dawn, Lyanna had packed again. She and Jon fled the sept before the sun rose fully. She didn't say a word about the coin. She didn't tell Jon what the message really meant, because part of her feared something more than Lannister assassins, more than spies. She feared what would happen if Jon met Daenerys. Two dragon heirs, brought together by fire, blood, and destiny. She feared prophecy. In King's Landing, Cersei stood before her mirror, draped in black and crimson. Her hair was pinned high, her expression carved from stone. Qyburn entered silently. "They've moved again," he said. "The boy and his mother. I expected as much. There's another problem," he added. "We've confirmed it. The Silver Queen has heard the rumors. She sent one of her own." Cersei turned slowly. "Then we are running out of time." She crossed the room and stared out over the city. "Send a message to the Golden Company," she said. "I want the boy alive. His mother, I care less for. But your grace," Qyburn said carefully, "if the boy is truly Rhaegar's son, his claim is worthless unless someone believes in it," she snapped. "And no one will believe in a dead boy." She turned to Qyburn and smiled coldly. "Unless I raise him myself." Back in the Reach, Jon finally confronted Lyanna beneath an old tree whose roots twisted like broken bones. "You never told me," he said quietly. "Not about Daenerys, not about Essos, not even about my father." Lyanna looked tired, not from the road, but from years of carrying a truth that didn't want to stay buried. "I wanted to protect you." "From what?" "From who you are." He stepped closer. "You say my father was Rhaegar, that I'm not Jon Snow. Then who am I, really? Some lost prince? A ghost with a crown I'll never wear?" "You're my son," she said, her voice cracking. "And the only thing that matters to me. That's not enough anymore." He held up the coin. "I want to meet her, Daenerys. I want to know who I am before someone else decides for me." Lyanna looked away, tears threatening. "You have no idea what that path leads to, Jon. It's not glory. It's not justice. It's fire. Fire and blood. Jon, it's not glory. It's not justice. It's fire. Fire and blood. Then maybe that's what I was born for." At that moment, a raven soared across the trees, its wings dark against the rising sun. A letter was tied to its leg. Jon took it. It was sealed with black wax, no sigil. Just 2 words scrawled in hurried ink. "She knows." Jon looked up. "Who?" Lyanna's face went pale. "Cersei." In the shadows of the free cities, Daenerys Targaryen stared at her dragons circling overhead. Her hair whipped in the sea breeze as her fleet prepared to sail west. She was done waiting. The game had begun. The pieces were moving, and somewhere in the Reach, her blood was waking up. The sea was calm when Daenerys Targaryen's ships set sail for Westeros, but the fire inside her was not. She stood at the bow of the lead ship, wind in her silver hair, eyes fixed on the horizon. Behind her the dragons circled in the sky, Drogon, largest and fiercest, letting out a low roar that echoed over the water. She had waited her whole life for this, to return, to reclaim, to destroy those who had wronged her family. But now everything had changed. Aegon Targaryen lived, and he wasn't her brother. He was her nephew, a child hidden by wolves, raised in snow, and born of the woman her brother had abandoned everything for. Lyanna Stark, Dany clenched the railing. "If he's truly Rhaegar's son," she murmured, "then his claim is stronger than mine." Tyrion beside her raised an eyebrow. "Does it matter, your grace? The realm only bows to those who take power, not those who inherit it." "Tell that to Robert Baratheon," she said coldly. Tyrion sipped his wine. "He only wore the crown because everyone else was dead. You, my queen, have dragons, armies, and if Jon Snow is truly who they say, perhaps you'll have something else." She glanced at him. "And what's that?" "A choice." Far from the sea, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen, stood atop a rocky hill, looking down at the river below. In his hand was the coin Quaithe had given him. In his mind a storm of questions. Lyanna stood beside him, older now than she had ever imagined she would be, worn from hiding, her face thinned by secrets. "This is your last chance," she said. "We disappear, for good. We find a place in the Vale or across the narrow sea. We live as no one." Jon turned the coin in his palm. "But I'm not no one." "You could be," she said, pleading. "You don't owe anyone this. The throne, the name, the war. Jon stared at her. But you do. That cut deep. You've spent your life protecting me from what I am, he said. But that doesn't change the truth. What truth? He turned to her, voice low and steady. That I was never meant to be Jon Snow, and you were never meant to raise me in shadows. He reached out and touched her hand. You were meant to be a queen's sister, a prince's wife. My mother, yes, but not a fugitive. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't stop him. She knew. Deep down she'd always known. He was leaving. In King's Landing, Cersei stood in the throne room, draped in black silk, a wolf's pelt across her shoulders. Before her knelt 3 assassins from Braavos, cold-eyed, blood-tested. Find him, she said. If Daenerys reaches him first, we lose everything. What about the woman? One asked. Cersei smiled thinly. Make her scream. The assassins bowed and vanished into the shadows. Behind her, Jaime stood, jaw tight. You're hunting a child. He's not a child, she snapped. He's the sword pointed at my son's neck. Your son is a bastard born of incest, Jaime muttered. She turned, rage flashing. Say it again. He didn't, but something in her eyes told him this was no longer about the throne. This was about fear, legacy, control. And Cersei Lannister would burn kingdoms to keep the truth buried. On the shores of the Stormlands, Daenerys made landfall. She rode ahead of her army, dragons soaring above, when a rider approached bearing a torn northern banner. She halted. The guards reached for blades, but the rider dismounted and pulled back his hood. Jon. Daenerys stared at him. The resemblance was subtle, but undeniable. You're him, she said. I'm no one, Jon replied. But you carry my brother's blood. He nodded. I didn't come to take anything from you, he added. I came to stop what's coming. And what's coming? Jon looked to the sky, where storm clouds gathered behind Drogon's wings. Fire and a queen who won't stop until every truth is dead. That night, Daenerys and Jon sat before the fire. They spoke little, but something unspoken passed between them, the weight of blood, of war, of loss. He told her about Lyanna. She told him about Viserys, about exile, about the price of waiting too long. Are we enemies? He asked. No, she said, but we might be the only ones who can decide what the realm becomes. Jon turned to her. Then let's decide. In the shadows of the Red Keep, Cersei received the worst news of her life. A raven from the Reach, a boy with dragon's blood, had landed with Daenerys Targaryen. The note was unsigned, but the message was clear. You've lost him. Cersei stood, face pale, hands shaking. Not because he was with Daenerys, but because now the truth was no longer hers to control. And in the north, where snow began to fall again, Ned Stark stood at the crypt of Lyanna Stark. He looked down at her stone face and whispered, I kept the promise. I saved her. Then he looked at the empty space beside her statue and knew deep down the price of saving one life was dooming the realm to fire and blood. Was dooming the realm to fire and blood.